Loading snacks.
What's good, Loaded Snacks Universe? The boy Jokes is here. Got the homie Gay. I got the homie Sin. And it is time for another episode of Spoiler Boys.
Spoiler Boys.
Gentlemen, we have reached the end of season 2 of Loki. We're here to discuss episode 6 titled Glorious Purpose, which is, I like this full circle thing for Loki that they've done with him, because the first episode of season 1 was also called Glorious Purpose. So I thought this was a kind of a cool way to end things out. But let's go ahead and go around and let's get some ratings on what we thought as far as the episode. Sin, where are you at?
I'm between an 8 and a 9.
Gage?
The 8.
Sin, I'm kind of where you're at. I'm between an 8 and a 9, but right now I'm gonna say an 8. But I think this one maybe talk me up to a 9, depending on when we walk through this. But overall, I think it was a solid entry to the season. So let's just go ahead and jump on in and talk about it. Before we get to the actual show itself, something kind of cool that they did. I don't know how, like with time movies and stuff, this is like, I think this is the first time that this has been done, but they did the typical MCU Marvel scroll opening the show, but they did it in reverse. I thought that was kind of cool that they did to open the show up. It was weird for a second, but then I was like, Loki, time makes sense. So I thought that was a little interesting piece that they did to start the show out. But of course, show kicks off and we pick right back up where Loki, of course, returned to the TVA right before the Loom impending destruction occurred for it. Loki, of course, time slips back into that current version of himself, and he realizes, all right, let's go ahead and let's try this again. Only slight difference he did once he got back, he kind of moved things a little bit quicker to try to get Victor Timely down the ramp and to put the thing in the thing to shoot off to the Loom. But of course it ended up still failing. Didn't really change anything at that point. So it was like, all right, time slipping. It looks like we're about to try this out a couple more times to see if we can get things right. So of course we start to see Loki time slipping and going back and just trying to fix very small, subtle things to give him more time to see if he can get Victor Timely down the ramp to shoot off the prototype into the Loom. But we find out that even just a little bit of time just wasn't enough. Now, so far, before we go into all of the jumping backs and talking about some certain points, how do we feel right now about what is having to happen to try to stop the Loom from exploding? Gage, where are you at?
I mean, I'm kind of bored, to be honest with you, because I told y'all when we talked about this, like last episode and probably the episode before it, Loki's gonna have to do it. This is wasting my time. Not even like, bro, when they flashed on screen, when my man was just like, hey dog, how long is it gonna take for me to learn everything I need to know about quantum physics? And I was like, everything you need to know about quantum physics.
He was like, mechanics, physics, engineering.
My man was like, centuries, decades. And then that joint was like centuries later. I was like, are you kidding me, dog? You like, for real, in my head, I'm like, yo, he gotta be the one to go down the joint. Why are we doing this, dog? You know what I'm saying? It was cool. Like, for real, I watching him do what he was doing to the point where he was like annoying to Mobius. It almost seemed like Mobius was starting to remember or something. Really? Like, oh, what are you doing? Why are you acting like that? Trust me, it's gonna work. No, you know what I mean? Like, he just was like rushing people. Like, it was cool But man, Slim got the patience of a saint, of a god. Because I mean, again, this is somebody who's already like probably 1,500 years old or something like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I guess centuries is it's not a blink of an eye, but you know, whatever. Like when you say centuries to somebody who's already 1,500 years old, I mean, I guess that's like saying like it's a couple years, or you know what I'm saying, it's gonna take some hours, you know what I mean, or whatever. Like I don't really know how to quantify what that really means. But I know when it flashed on screen for me, I was like, nah, he didn't.
Stop.
They didn't do this for centuries, dog. Like he didn't. I think there's something significant about that we could get into later. But like, nah, it was cool. It was cool.
Yeah, because first thing I thought about when it said centuries later, I was like, man, this dude complained about falling for 30 minutes. Now we try to go back and do this for centuries. Like, that's nuts. Sin, where are you at?
Oh, I'm in the same place Jake was. Like, once he comes out there and he's talking to time and everything, like, yeah, you volunteered, you're gonna go. I'm like, no, Loki, that's not how this works. It's clear you're gonna have to be the one to walk down. So now I'm wasting an hour of all of this because we know he has to walk down at this point. Like, it was. Don't get me wrong, it was, some funny moments, some entertaining moments with all that. Him when Victor Timely's walking down the loom finally, and the way he's like just kind of just so calm, just take your time.
Motivating my man.
Don't do that. You know what I mean? Like, he's done it so many times before. Like, that was cool, but it was I would gauge, like, we know where this has to go. Let's speed this along. Why are we doing this for centuries upon centuries? Loki, you just switch places and just go do it.
I'll be honest, I kind of wanted to see the time when he put the joint down and it rolled off
the edge. I said the same thing.
Kind of wanted to see that joint. You know what I'm saying? Just because he said it so like, listen. He grabbed my man like by his collar and was like, do not. Whatever you do
like,
not.
That was that one time when like, he almost had it and then that happened. It's like,
Yep.
Yeah.
That's why I feel like he probably flung off in that moment. Everybody in the room probably saw what Loki act like. You know what I mean? Like I would have liked to have seen that. They could have gave me that in like an after credit or something. I would have been dope. But yeah,
I dig it. I thought one of the funnier ones when he was going back was when he had to go back and interrupt Miss Minutes and ask for help. Miss Minutes like, listen, I know you're upset and all this, but I need help in trying to fix this issue right now. Brought Timely out of it. I thought that was hilarious. So multiple times over centuries. I still for a second I was like, okay, this still isn't going to work, and we're going to have to figure something else out. But hey, with the motivation, telling Timely what to do, don't sit the thing down on the ramp, and it finally was able to put it in, shoot it off, and get it to the loom. I was like, all right, we rolling here. We got things working. Centuries helped out, but then he told Timely, was like, yeah, come back, and I was like, so it looks like Timely is gonna be one of those points that he just has to get white regardless. I was for sure dude was not going to make it back down into the room to actually be safe. I was pretty sure he was going to end up getting dust at the time, close the door. Sadly, we lost Timely, but you know what? Mission was a success. But quickly we find out that even though they were able to get it out to the loom, it started to expand and those timelines were going through. Readings were reading properly, but then all of a sudden it was like, something's wrong. And we quickly, as something we kind of knew already, the fact that these timelines, these branches that are occurring, they're infinite. And Timely unfortunately realized this and was like, it's a scaling problem. We can't equivalate to infinite. And we find out that the loom still can't handle it. And of course, we're right back in the same place.
I like you, dog, but I swear you just made up a word. I don't know what you just said. That's not a real word. But you're right.
What?
We can't equivalate this. We can't do it.
It's too early.
It's never too early, man. It's never too early. But of course, at this point, Loki's a little bit stuck on like what to do at this point. But he realizes he's got to go back and figure something out. So at this point, he goes ahead and time slips, and he goes ahead and he time slips back to the end of season 1, at the end of time, to the point where Sylvie, him, and He Who Remains, of course, are in the room, and we're trying to kill He Who Remains, and tries to go to stop Sylvie, but we run into it again. She kills him, and now we got to go back, playing this loop over and over again, trying to stop Sylvie. Needless to say, I don't know how many times exactly that occurred, but of course, it was a ridiculous amount of times.
She was washing him.
She was washing my man every single time. I don't know about you, but the sound that Victor Time or He Who Remains just does when he gets shanked by Sylvie every single I'm just like, man, that just sounds bad. But they go back and forth, and of course at the point Loki already is getting Sylvie's moves down, so he's just calm about it, just saying, Sylvie, you can't do this, and then he gets to the point where she goes to throw her sword at He Who Remains. He stops it, throws it, or knocks it down. He's like, why don't you just stop her? Like, why don't you defend yourself right now from her killing you? Like I was laughing at that. Like, dude's just still chill sitting behind the desk, and then he starts realizing that, oh, Loki, he's doing the time slipping thing, and he pulls this little pad out and stops Sylvie in time. I don't know about y'all. I was like, this dude could have done this the whole entire time while they've been fighting, but of course, this is all a part of the plan. How do we think about this instance between the three of them going down in there, Sim?
I enjoyed it. Him trying to get past Sylvie, and it was clearly not working. Even the conversation when he stopped the fight, like you said, he's having a conversation with Loki about, oh, no, like, you think I just was gonna let her kill me? Like, no, this is all part of the process. Like, you don't even know how to stop, you don't even know how to pause time yet. Like, then seeing that Loki did know how to, like, he kind of reversed it, so that he didn't know how to pause time. This is the first time we did this. I've been doing this for a while. I've learned a lot. I personally enjoyed their conversation there. I just like the way he plays He Who Remains. Just the banter that they had with it. But yeah, that was one of my favorite points of the episode. I think that conversation, I will say.
I dig it. Just that whole conversation between them, trying to figure things out. He Who Remains knowing that, oh, you're having an issue with the loom and with the scale. Like, it's just the way my man is talking to Loki right now. Just like, listen, I know this, bro. I'm sitting here at the end of time. I've seen this. I know what it is that you're trying to do. And he kind of just, I don't want to say he throws Victor Timely under the bus, but it's like, you think it's a scaling issue? It's not a scaling issue.
He started making fun of how he talks to stutter.
Hey, like, this is your variant, but who really cares? Gage, what did you think of it?
I'm bored, dog. Y'all wasting my time. Let's get to it, dog. Nah, cause for real, like you telling me this man went reverse time enough and time slipped enough that he could learn quantum physics and he couldn't learn to whoop Sylvie ass? I'm not buying it, bro. I'm not buying it, bro. This is a problem for me. You know what I'm saying? Like, all right, I'm like, all right, so we just gonna do this over and over again until every move she could possibly make, he knows every one of them, and he can stop everything because there's no way. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. He should have been able to punish her. He should have been able to beat the brakes off of her, even if he ain't kill her. He should have been able to knock. You can't knock this youngin' out. You can't Loki trick her into a wall or something. Like, I don't get it. You know what I'm saying? So, like, I'm very unsatisfied with this. You know what I mean? Like, come on, man. We've been at this for centuries, and like, and like we learned all of this information and we can do all this stuff perfectly, and yet, if you fight this same person a couple hundred times, which is what it seemed like, hey Slim, you ought to be like, I think really honestly what it does is it speaks to the stubbornness of Loki. Just how stubborn Loki really is, and how fixated Loki becomes on trying to do things the way that he thinks they're supposed to be done, because in his head he's already decided that's what's supposed to happen, right? This is what has to happen, so I have to find a way to stop her without killing her. He knows he really needs to kill her, technically, you know what I mean, in order to stop it from happening. And what he's doing is he is reliving it over and over again to try to do something different that isn't the thing that actually solves the problem. And so he knows it, but he doesn't know it. Because even when Victor, when He Who Remains stops Sylvie and says, look, bro, by this point, I would have thought you would have learned how to pause time, how to, whatever. You think this is the first time we had this conversation? And Loki says to him, you think this is the first time we had this conversation? It's the first time we had this conversation, right? So Loki does know. He does remember. But he doesn't want to do what is necessary. Which, if he does what He Who Remains is basically forcing him to do, it means he has to kill Sylvie. And he doesn't want to kill Sylvie. Now, to be honest, dog, why? I don't know. I don't know why Loki doesn't just want to kill. Like, you had a few moments with her. I mean, I get it. I can understand the idea of him being like, well, I'm a different Loki. I don't want to just kill. I don't want to kill people. You know what I'm saying? Anymore. And at this point, I guess, yeah, he has spent centuries with this person in some manner, right? But the idea of him trying to figure out how it is that he can solve for the problem in a way that isn't something that He Who Remains has already figured out. And it turns out that He Who Remains is sitting behind the desk, allowing her to kill him because he does not want to be there anymore. He wants to die. He has every intention of no longer being alone by himself at the end of time. And he wants Loki to figure out that he needs to be the person who's there. Like, his entire purpose is to put Loki in that position. And so Loki just being stubborn. And so I think it's cool because it speaks to how stubborn he is. And you really get a good idea of him just like, no, I wanted to be this way. I think he knows that that's what it is, and he's just refused. He's trying to figure out any other way possible to do it, because clearly he could punish her. Clearly he could punish her. So it's actually really interesting to me.
Dig it. But deeper into the conversation, of course, Loki starts having with He Who Remains. The main thing was talking about the loom and trying to figure the issue out so they could try to repair it. But then He Who Remains ends up telling them that, the loom is just a failsafe. And like the only job it has is to protect the sacred timeline. And when something like, of course, what is occurring right now happens, it just destroys all the other branch times in order to try to just save the one timeline. So I think that was that one piece of information that Loki got that was like, well, that's what started changing the way that he was going to have to do the plan, and realizing at that point that the only way through this is the fact that I'm going to have to kill Sylvie. And Loki is trying to juggle that thought, but he, just like you said, Gage, he doesn't want to do it. He wants to try to figure something else out. So after getting that tidbit of information, realizing that he, in his words, he has to change this equation. He sees an equation written on the board and realizes, I can't do this the way that I was trying to. He decides to time slip and literally take us all the way back in the beginning of season 1, where he's sitting in the room with Mobius when he's doing like that first interview with him and trying to understand what makes Loki Loki. And Loki pretty much just stops the conversation, obviously been there beforehand, and just pretty much like, listen, I know what you're gonna say, I know what you're gonna do. You want to find out what makes Loki Loki? And he kind of went through the whole entire thing. And Mobius is like, all right, you got the playbook, you know what this is gonna be about. Let's go ahead and talk about it. But in this point, this is where Loki is starting to have the conversation with Mobius about that, making that hard decision that he doesn't want to do, but he's knowing that it's probably what it is that he has to do in order for things to change. And Mobius gives him a story about, he tries to be vague about it, but clearly we know that he's talking about himself, about a hunter needing to do what needs to be done to get the mission done. And I think I'm on the page. I'm not 100% sure, because at this time, like, I know Mobius doesn't know anything about his past, but he comes to a point where he finds out that, like 5,000 people get wiped out that have no business getting wiped out from this 8-year-old child. His brother was in the water, and in order to save, they had to prune the 8-year-old child. But of course, Mobius is unable to do so. And I'm feeling like this is not him necessarily, obviously not remembering that, he has his 2 sons, but it seems like it's like a part of that memory, like preventing him from doing this. I mean, granted, I can only imagine what it's going to be like that. Hey, you find out that you now have to prune/kill an 8-year-old kid to save the sacred timeline. But in that moment of hesitation, of course, multiple hunters were killed. These 5,000 other people were killed. So another hunter had to step in and do the deed in order to make sure the greater good was saved at this point. And Mobius had a lot of ways of twisting the whole glorious purpose thing that Loki always says over and over again. It's kind of that purpose that, you have to do, but it ends up not being so glorious about it. How do we feel about the conversation that they had with each other?
I think it was good. I think it was necessary for Loki to hear all that so he can have the perspective to make the decision that he was going to make with killing Sylvie. Just the greater good, like take her out and we save all of this type of deal. Like sometimes you have to do what you got to do. I think it was necessary for him to hear it.
But I think once he learned it, it was like, positions changed a little bit. Gage, what do you think?
I think with the knowledge that he has of who Mobius is and his ability to kind of step in and be like, oh, Renslayer, like now I get it. You know what I mean? And understanding that Mobius couldn't do it because of the remnants of who he was, him being a father and having, 2 sons of his own that were like in that age range, kept him from being able to do the job that he was supposed to do. If Loki hadn't had that knowledge of what Mobius's previous life was, even though Mobius doesn't know it in that moment, that they're talking about it, I think it changes things. He needed that perspective, and he needed to be able to say, oh, okay, well now I get it. It's Renslayer. I know what it was now. You know what I mean? So I think I think it is one of those moments that's important because it allows us to get full circle. A lot of times, very often in these shows, circle back and close some of those loopholes. And this is a loophole that kind of is left over from season 1, where they never really did discuss what happened between Mobius and Renslayer, or how they knew each other, or were they a couple, you know what I mean? Like, just like you don't really get that information. And so now you have that. And so I thought it was cool to actually go back and clear that up.
Dig it. But of course, they have that conversation, and then it kind of puts into perspective what it is Loki needs to do. I thought my man had cuffs on, but I guess they uncuffed him at that point. But I think it was still weird how like he got up and like shook Mobius's hand, like where they were supposed to be having like that interrogation piece, but whatever. Shook his hand, and of course Loki gets ready to time slip out. The whole entire that timeline just evaporates in front. I just love how they do the whole shredding time, like the unraveling. I just love how they do that. But after that, of course, he time slips back to the end of where we are, episode 5. Right before Sylvie gets ready to be erased. Everybody else, we see them go back through that timeline, getting ripped to shreds. But this is where he's getting ready to start talking with Sylvie, and he ends up, moving them outside of time. She starts questioning him. Is like, wait a minute, what? Like, what? He's like, I figured out how to control time slipping. I've moved this outside of time. And this is where he starts having the conversation with her about him knowing what it is that needs to be done to stop everything from happening. Where she figures it out real quick that it's got to be stopping her from killing He Who Remains will undo everything. And she's like, I guess it's you coming to get my blessing to kill me. And so it clearly is like, no, but like she clearly understands. And when he explains to her about the loom being just a fail safe for everything, doesn't surprise her at all. But when this conversation occurs, this is where things shift once more, and Loki piecing together the fact that, okay, maybe there's another way that we can go about this. Because like at the end of the day, like, he doesn't want to kill Sylvie, but he's almost come to the point now where he understands that this is going to be the only way to do this, so He Who Remains will remain at the end of time and being able to watch over things. I thought their conversation was pretty interesting. It was brief, like it was only for a couple of minutes, but this is what gives Loki the motivation to finally do what you said from the beginning, what we knew was gonna have to be done,
to walk the plank.
And once he
onto the Bifrost, my guy.
We waited through all this to get on walk the stupid bridge. Come on, let's get to it.
So at this point, he time slips back to what I'll say is current time, and he takes the quick look. He takes the quick look around the room and realizes that, what, it's got to be him. And, he slowly walks down the steps, and everybody's just staring at him like Loki, what are you doing? What are you doing right now? But of course, he gets to the end of the steps, closes the barrier off that door, and so nobody else can come through there to try to stop him. At this point, Mobius and Sylvie, of course, try to come after him. And this is where he kind of gives that brief little, I know what it is that I have to do. I know what type of god I have to become. And it's just seeing what you guys saying?
No, I'm laughing at Jason's face.
And what god he has to become. And Sylvie talking to Mo is like, listen, I gotta get out there. And at one point I thought, okay, she's about to do something to stop the whole thing, but it ends up not being. Loki, of course, uses his powers, opens the door. First thing, a man walks out there. So first thing I'm like, okay, Loki, I know you're a god and all, but are you about to go out here and just get disintegrated by everything that's going out there? And my man has no weakness at all, and just you can see it's hitting him. It's shredding the TVA clothes as he starts walking down the pathway to get to the end. And of course, we get a new traditional Loki suit, I guess will be the way to say it. Green outfit, green cape comes out, horns come back. It's like a Loki we really haven't seen in a while here. But of course, the rest of them, Mobius and all them, all they can honestly do is just stand there and watch what it is that Loki is doing. And he gets to the end, and I guess initially, were you guys thinking that he was going to try to attempt to fix the loom, or did you have it in there that he was just going to go ahead and destroy the loom at that point in time? Did y'all think that was what he was going to do?
I had no clue what he was going to do. I know whatever it was going to be the end of it. I didn't know what he was going to do until it started happening. So no, I didn't.
Nope.
I at this point, bro, who knows how many times you think he walked that plank, bro?
Before, I think it was one time.
Nah.
I think it was one.
I think that's the only time he did it. I don't know what he was gonna do. I just knew whatever he was doing was gonna work because he walked out there and my man clothes started shredding. He was a G, capital G, for God.
God.
And visually, this joint was gorgeous.
Yeah,
insane. Yeah, it was fire.
Incredible. Like him, again stepping onto the Bifrost and taking that walk again. It's full circle for this Loki. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And watching him just grab time by the throat, bro. It's like grab time and just be like, well, let me just whip this joint the way I want it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that lovely green. I know you was loving it.
And they like, what do you, what's he doing? And Sylvie's like, he's giving us a chance, right? Like her interaction with him when they talk about him killing her, and her saying that that's not what free will is. Free will is like, even if you know you're gonna lose, having the option to fight, like being given the option to choose to fight because you know that you can. Like without that, it really isn't even. It's not free will, right? And that's what you're supposed to be after, and that coming to that realization as a Loki for her when she's lived through what she's lived through, right? When she says like, I've been to the end of like thousands of timelines. You know what I mean? I've seen it. I've seen that destruction over and over again. And him being a person who basically has spent his entire life orchestrating chaos, right? To now be in a place where he's like, all right, well, yeah, the chaos of what life is, the unknowns, being able to just do it the way you want to do it is something special he's lived at. So it kind of makes sense, I'm gonna throw a curveball.
Uh-oh.
How far ahead of where in time, because they're outside of time, right? Is the time stone green because Loki controls time already?
I was thinking.
You know what?
Hey, listen.
Is he already like?
In kind of like the weird kind of loop or whatever. Like,
yeah,
I could get behind on it. Like, just see how the show, like you said, with time loops and everything, he's now god of time. Like, yeah, I could definitely see that.
Everything they actually do with time and time manipulation in the MCU up to this point,
green,
up to this show has been green. Everything. When you see that, like it's always green, except for in this show. Until you get to the end of it.
Loki. Yep. Yeah.
And that's kind of crazy.
Yep.
Hey, no.
I'm gonna say yes. I'm saying yes.
I was pretty because everything once that happened, I was just like, like Loki didn't have this time stuff. And listen, if that is the truth, like at some point I would need a conversation like between him and Strange, like listen, the only reason you were able to do that stuff was because of me. I'm the god.
I mean, I'm sure that it's coming at some point, man. Again, if they doing what it seems like, obviously they're doing what the comics is doing.
That's the first thing I thought about. I was like, oh, he's turning Loki Prime, like Gage was explaining last weekend.
My man is the god of stories, bro.
Listen, the god of stories,
Avenger Prime, dog.
The god of time, the king of time. Like it's just like you could just give him so many titles at this point. Like how he normally would introduce himself to somebody is like, I'm Loki, son of Asgard, son of Odin. It's like he has like these newer titles now that he could just throw out there to folk.
He's the god of stories, bro. and his variants have to exist. And like He Who Remains already told him, and I was a little confused about this, but He Who Remains was like, my variants are already out there.
Right.
Like it's it's nothing you can do. So that tells us that even with this, that this is what's intended to happen. This Ouroboros, this loop of time, is literally a loop. It's already happened, and Loki's just figuring it out again, which to me means that he's been the person that is the god of stories the whole time. That part of the story is him removing He Who Remains from being the person at the end of time, and him becoming the person that's at the end of time, the god that's at the end of time, because that's how it all works. That's what it is. So time, bro, time stories.
Hey, I dig it. But I mean, quickly to go through, we see Loki, grabbing those branches of time, eventually opens a portal to what we can tell is we see the throne at the end of time. He goes through the portal, and all those branches, those timelines, they all go with him as he goes through the portal. And of course, space just becomes dark where they're at in the TVA. And I thought this was very cool to see my man Loki, taking those steps, going up the steps, grabbing those branches. And listen, that whole entire thing was dope.
Shout out to my man House Shoes.
Hey,
my man
Slip-ons.
My man slippers, dog.
And listen, my man gotta be comfortable in doing all this. But grabbing these branches, it's like almost like he's giving new life to these branches, and you start to see them become like his cape. They start integrating into his cape as he's walking up the steps, and it's like my man is finally stepping up to be like, he doesn't necessarily want to be this king or this god, but he knows like this is what he has to do. Gets to the top, takes his place on the throne. We see him pull all these branches of time together, and the camera of course zooms out, and we come back to where the TVA is at. And initially when we see it, it almost looks like the loom actually in place, but then we see the camera angle shift, and it ends up becoming a giant tree, this tree of time. So
yeah, it's Idrisil,
which I was going to get like
Idrisil, yeah.
I know you're good with Norse mythology. I know a little bit enough that this works for me. But to see that tree show up, which one, it brings Loki's character like really full circle here. Obviously, that tree is used in Norse mythology. We've seen it in Thor. We've seen it in the movies. We know it connects the 9 realms. It connects the human world. Like, it connects every single, honestly, for this point in the MCU, it literally branches and connects everything together. I mean, branches, I think, is the proper term when you think about it, to go alongside with the tree. So yeah. I was like, yo, this is Loki's story. Like this is like a good, how you want to make the good trilogy. You want to make a good trilogy. You want it to end on a good note. Like this is it. But you hope that they don't make the 4th one that ends up messing it up or whatever. But my man's story is just perfect at this point. My man ends up becoming this king, this god, but of course in doing so, he has to be alone. Like Gage, I think we've said this numerous times that, hey, Loki is gonna have to be, or is He Who Remains at this point in time, which essentially is what he has to
the god of
become
stories
in order to save and to give everybody this chance.
It's his glorious purpose.
It's his glorious purpose.
It's his glorious purpose. It's the thing that he's been striving for since the first time we met Loki. Mm-hmm. And we've seen what a version of Loki ends up being. The one that we followed ends up dying anyway, right? Mm-hmm. By the time he figures out that there's a purpose greater than him, right? That it's worth a sacrifice. And knowing that in order to lead, in order to be a king, a leader, whatever, a CEO, there have to be sacrifices, and those sacrifices aren't supposed to be the people around you. It's things that you sacrifice of yourself. It's your time, it's your energy, it's things you want to go do that you can't go do because you need to stay and make decisions. You need to, be left behind to take care of certain things while other people go do other things. Like, that's just his role in wanting to lead, to be a leader, his belief that he's supposed to be a king or that there's more to it for him, all correct, but all under the his issue has always been that he's wanted to do it his way, and that there were no sacrifices for him. Everybody else just kind of falls on swords for him, and in this case he's realized that, all right, so I have to take the L. Like, I did all of this because I didn't want to be alone, and I didn't want to lose my friends and whatever, but in order to give them the opportunity to have life and to have a fighting chance, I have to go somewhere else and be alone. That's what's necessary. And so he spent centuries with him. He got a lot of time with them. You know what I mean? In some manner. And so now, you know, he could have just kept slipping as much as he wanted, just to kind of hang out, to spend more time. He could have slipped back to times where he was hanging out with Sylvie. Maybe he did. You know what I mean? And we don't know, right? But, you know, coming to the realization and knowing, like, all right, this is what it's going to take. I think it's full circle. And I think he's been the god of stories the entire time the MCU has existed. As a matter of fact, I think he's been the god of stories since like the early 2000s for us with the original X-Men franchise. That's what I think.
Ooh.
I think one of them strands my man grabbed up, you know what I'm saying, and roped into the trees.
He pulled that timeline in.
I agree.
But Loki, of course, assumes that position. And afterwards, you know, we cut to a black screen and we just get the word after to show up. Now, I don't know how much time has passed since those events and us coming back to the TVA, because, of course, the TVA is back and fully functional. Of course, you clearly see some different changes. We see, you know, posters of the tree of Idrisil on the wall. It's like clearly some time has passed because they've rebuilt everything back to full working order again, or at least a stable working order, maybe is the way to say. And we hear comments, you know, talking about like, this is where we get an Easter egg, little small thing. For some people, if you didn't watch certain movies, it would have went past you super quick. But you know, we learn about, you know, we're looking to see if any of these other Kang variants have figured out anything as of yet. And Mobius was like, well, hey, we did have this incident on 616, which clearly is the MCU timeline, but he was like, nah, they took care of it. Like that one was a wrap. Give us that talk back to Ant-Man Quantumania. And I was like, oh, my man Scott Lang gonna end up having to get pulled to the TVA for something at some point in time. So
it's weird because he specifically says this 616 adjacent timeline, as if it's not the 616 like the comics 616, but it's the MCU 616 realm. He says realm. He calls it a realm, which I think is interesting. I think different timelines are going to be called different realms. I think that when they refer to what's happening in Deadpool, when they refer to what's happening in the X-Men universe, what was happening in the Spider-Man universe, the Raimi universe, or whatever, I feel like they're going to refer to them as realms, maybe in some way. And that's a thing that they'll do. But he says the 616 adjacent realm, which means like it isn't necessarily the 616, but it's a lot like it, or it's next to it, or something. But it definitely also means that like either they're wrong, either Mobius is wrong about what happened, or nah, that Kang was weak and got beat by Ant-Man. And everything Sin felt about how terrible that was, and like Kang's not a threat, and they haven't shown me why he's a threat. You're absolutely right.
Right. That wasn't the one to be.
It was not.
Which
it's not the one. He's one of the ones, but he's not the one. Right? Because like,
family.
Yeah, he did get whooped by the Ant family.
Dog. And so I imagine down the road somewhere, Scott Lang is going to end up having another interaction with the Kang. And I think, Sin, you've said this before. He gonna think that this Kang is the same one and Ant-Man probably gonna get bodied by that
Probably.
Kang. Like, oh, you not built the same as the one that I fought. Like,
I went hands with my cat, even though he was
I
whooping
mean, he
me.
didn't though. He was getting whooped.
That's
He
what I
was
say,
getting money.
He was getting dog crap beat out of him.
Definitely was getting whooped by that Kang. Like he definitely was
Hey,
not.
my man
He
gonna
took
have
out his
another.
whole empire with a gang of ants
Hey, facts.
and some rebels.
My man gonna release another book that's gonna outline all that went down in the Quantum Realm, part 2 of it. But of course, we're back in the TVA. We do see B-15 and Mobius start having a conversation. Like, she's saying, hey, they need you in the room. Like, clearly, the war room, like where everybody's at. But my man Mobius is kind of like, they can do without me. And we see that Mobius is having that decision to end up stepping away from the TVA. We don't even know exactly to what extent that is going to look like as far as him stepping away. But we do see, of course, B-15 goes into that war room where it looks like, plans, they're monitoring, they're doing their thing. I forget her name. That was like the leader of the table when they were having the discussions the first time.
The judge?
The judge, yeah. We see her, of course, back in her spot, kind of doing the whole entire thing. The camera moves around a couple of times. Like we see OB back in, I'm gonna call his dungeon, of course. He now has a second volume of the TVA handbook that has been rewritten. I guess obviously with using Idrisil probably instead of all the other things. I don't know if necessarily he's taking, I guess the loom stuff is probably going to come out of the book because there's no need for it anymore. Maybe he'll have notes and something for it for whatever. We also do go and we actually go back to seeing Victor Timely as a child once again. That same scene that we saw at the beginning of the season where Renslayer and Miss Minutes came through to drop the TVA handbook in his window. That doesn't happen. He's just in there making the candles. So clearly we see that Victor Timely doesn't become that version of himself. But I don't know about you guys, so my mind is thinking now, I'm like, okay, well, we have Victor Timely at the TVA outside of time. Is that version of Timely still there, or did they have to like put him back somewhere and then they fix things so he doesn't I don't know exactly what that's going to be at this point. The only thing that I can think of is one, I'm just thinking Kang as a whole, is that eventually, because clearly the Kang War is still a thing, is that there's another Kang out there that is puppeteering this whole entire thing. I don't know about y'all. I'm just thinking that he's trying to strategically put his variants in certain places, maybe, and so he can eventually go back. I don't know. That's just far down the road, and I know we can speculate on that until the end of time to see it. I tried.
You did.
I tried. After that, we shift to Mobius. We see him standing outside of course, his house. In that timeline, he's finally decided to go see what things could have been like. We see him, his two sons, of course, outside the house doing their thing. I feel like Gage, you said it before. Whoever his wife was that we're guessing, of course, we never see if she got snapped or whatever. I don't know if that's going to end up playing some type of role maybe later on. We see Sylvie, of course, come quickly talk to Mobius about him, seeing what could be possible. So clearly the two of them are looking like they're just going to exist outside of the TVA. They're going to exist outside, I guess, the main sacred timeline. I don't know exactly what it is they're going to do at this point for them. They just look like they're just going to be on the outskirts of everything. Maybe if that moment presents itself when they need to come back in to do something, they're going to be available to it. But I guess almost it's safe to say maybe since this Loki, of course, he's watching over time, he's being the god of stories. Sylvie is probably going to be our Loki for like the rest of like the MCU, the multiversal war. Whenever we get to it, I feel like maybe she's going to be the swap, because the Loki story seems like it's, I don't want, for better word, I'll say complete, but I can't imagine that that Loki doesn't show up to do something at some point with everything else that we're going to have going on afterwards for it. The only other piece really to talk about, they do shift the Renslayer. We do see her in that same type of space once Loki got pruned the time we saw him show up with all the other Lokis. And they made it a point to have that camera, of course, zoom around, pan down, one showing us pyramids, of course, wherever she was. So obviously we know there is a king that has ties to Egypt with pyramids. So that's obviously looking like that could potentially be a thing. But they also pan down and we see the plaque of the TVA that has like their catchphrase on it, and we see a part of it, you know, completely covered by grass. So I'm guessing maybe somehow that where that actual location is maybe another area where the TVA was, I'm guessing, a point in time, or I don't know if this is like an area where like universes have started to like collide with each other. I don't know. We don't get too much of that. The last part of that, we do see Renslayer, of course, look up into the sky, and we see, of course, that purple glow on her, which clearly we're guessing is that creature that Loki and them had to fight before trying to get Loki out of there. I'm pretty sure that's what she sees. She looks like she has a smile on her face, so maybe it's a little more to that. Obviously, we just get that quick little thing, and it goes away from her. And of course, the show just closes with us going back and seeing Loki in his glorious purpose, being the god of time, watching over everything. He's just sitting on the throne. Looks like a tear maybe wants to drop down, but I think my man is like content with what it is that what he's in place to do, and what he has to keep watch over everything at this point for it. And that is what brings us to the close of season 2 of Loki. Definitely is a good I think this story is a good place to complete it, but at the same time there's definitely, I feel like, more that we can clearly add on at this point. It's just a matter of if it's going to be another season of Loki, or if some of this story ends up spilling over, of course, into the movies at this point. Obviously these are just things that we're going to have to once again hang around and see where it goes. But how do we feel as Loki season 2 as a whole, though, gentlemen?
I thought it ended on a high note. I think it ended strongly overall. The whole season 1 and 2 together, season 2 just by itself, I think it ended on a really strong high note. And I wasn't like the super biggest fan of the first season of Loki or whatever, and some of the time travel stuff, you know, did get confusing as we were going through this, but overall where it landed, it landed on a high note for me. So I'm pleasantly pleased, I would say, at the end.
Dig it. Gage, where are you?
Pleasantly pleased. Put that on a shirt, bro. I was pleasantly pleased. Mainly, I think overall, I think the show is I'd give it a solid 8. You know what I mean? I think, you know, it definitely has its ups and downs. I have issues with certain things that happen, but overall, in terms of just doing what the MCU has been really good at doing, in finding a way to bring things full circle, finding a way to kind of call back to old episodes or old movies, or, you know what I mean? Like, it does that very well. I think that for the most part, this, I mean, this is the best show I think that the MCU has done. You know what I mean? Like, I think, and so for this particular season of it, though, again, it feels kind of confusing and so forth as it's starting. You know, I think it puts a really solid bow on it. You know what I mean? And I couldn't really recommend it to people without recommending they watch the first season. Like, you need to watch that first season. You know what I mean? For any of this to really matter. And it probably is stronger if you watch it all together, to be honest. Like, it probably is a lot stronger if you watch them, and all of what happened in that first season is still very fresh. But I think it does a good job of putting a solid cap on what we do know and leaving solid questions that give them enough space to weave things in and out where they need to. What happens with a Mobius? I don't know. I thought my man was gonna go back and he was gonna be with his kids. I didn't think he was gonna go back and watch his kids. I'm like, oh well, now you're just a creep, dog. Like I don't know what does that mean? Because I don't know what that means for him, and I don't know if that means that there's a Mobius spinoff or something like him and the other Loki, him and Sylvie just going off and doing things behind the scenes with time or something. Like that's just kind of creepy. Like I don't know what that means for Mobius. Does he get to go and live his own life? Because he didn't go to his timeline. He had to have just gone to a timeline. Because in his timeline, he left. Right? So he went to a timeline that must have been a timeline where he didn't leave. Right? Or he went back before that happened. You know what I mean? Or something like that. I don't know what timeline he's on. But he had to have been yanked from the sacred timeline, which I'm not sure exists anymore. I mean, right. I guess it does, but I don't think the sacred timeline exists anymore because the whole purpose of him averting the fact that there was a loom, the loom was there as a failsafe to make sure that only the sacred timeline existed. And so it continues in that loop and it just gets rid of all the other timelines, all the branch timelines. So now there's nothing but timelines and trees and branches. Like it's all one thing. So it's like, there is no sacred timeline, which basically means at this point, no one timeline is more important than any other. So yes, there's a Kang that's out there. The question is that a Kang that exists in the X-Men universe and a Kang that exists in the Spider-Man Raimi universe? Is it a Kang that exists in the No Way Home universe? Is it a Kang that exists in the What If universe, which, we'll see what If is like, next month or whatever. But now there is no sacred timeline, meaning that all of the timelines are equally important. And so now we got to have a battle world because we need one timeline, apparently. You know what I mean? So there's going to be something. And again, Kang is going to have, when Kang figures out from whatever those timelines are, and it'll be crazy for them to, again, refer to it and it'd be like him just in the Deadpool universe and a version of him that's in the 2000s X-Men universe or the First Class universe or, whatever it is, or the X-Men 97, X-Men 92 universe.
That one will be
cartoon version of Slim shows up, bro. Like, if you don't play with me, dog, if in X-Men 97, when they do that show, if there's a Kang that's in that, bro, I'm gonna lose it, dog. I'm gonna lose it. And for real, I'm about to crown Kevin Feige the god of stories, bro. He better always show up wearing green and horns and because, like, if they do that, dog, like now it's just like all of it is possible. All of it exists, and no piece of it being more important. Like there's an Avengers show I really like. You know what I'm saying? Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and then there's the one they did after that when they canceled the good one. And when I'm like, one of these is the real one. Nah, they're all both important.
I actually just put that on my tablet to watch when I was at work.
Dog, what Earth, bro?
Yeah, I've only seen like the first few episodes of it.
Bro.
But I know so much happens like that's happening in the MCU now, so I want to sit down and watch it just to,
just the secret invasion in that joint, bro.
That's the real secret invasion.
Yeah. So now I think that's the beauty of what this just did, and so I don't think you can understate the importance of what just happened in this show, and what it means to the greater MCU, and what they're able to do. And Sin and I had a conversation about with our friend Adam about how now it's like Marvel and the MCU is in a place to do shows that aren't for everybody, and you're maybe not necessarily supposed to watch everything. In the same way, when you walk in a comic book store, you pick up the comics you're interested in. That doesn't change the fact that the books you're not reading, there are canon events that are happening in those books, but you're not reading those books. So you might find them in a little footnote somewhere in a book you are reading, and maybe that makes you go and pick it up, or you go and you check it out, but you can't read it all. You can't keep track of everything, right? So then they do an event that brings everything together, and they're like, oh, World War Hulk. Well, you need to read X-Men, you need to read Avengers, you need to read this, you need to read this. And they do have a timeline that's in all these other books that exist, right? So when they're like, oh yeah, there's a Kang that exists in that old Fantastic Four universe, the first one, and in the second one, when Michael B. Jordan is listen, Michael B. Jordan's variants are it just,
hey yo,
it's
Michael B. Jordan is a Kang variant.
Well, I mean, maybe. But I'm just, like, but the idea again that like that if there's a Kang that comes from that Fantastic Four universe, and that would make sense, and that is a thing that Doctor Doom finds out, oh, there's this person that can do this thing with time and whatever, and that's how we get our Doctor Doom that now comes into the MCU, and it's the person that's sitting at the end of Battleworld, which is how it's supposed to happen based on the comics. Now it's like it can happen. It's all fair game. It all makes sense. You know what I'm saying? Like, we need an Illuminati. Again, we talked about it before, but I don't think you can really measure how important this moment is for the MCU. What it does for the past of the actual MCU, what it does for the future of the MCU, and how it makes other pieces of cinematic history that aren't MCU part of the MCU. Because now their timelines really do exist, quote unquote, within this timeline, because time has always been green in the MCU. And that has to be because this dude's been the person
the whole time,
pulling the strings the whole time. It's kind of nuts.
Hey, my man inserted himself. And look, wasn't that Thanos probably really was getting ready to go down, but he's like, nah, I need to interrupt that. Let me just go put myself in the position to be like, Thanos send me down there, because maybe Thanos is going to go down there and actually body everybody in that point in time. But I don't know. Dig it.
Marvel fans eating good.
I dig it. So I think it sounds like around the horn. I think we're all at 8s. It sounds like.
Yeah.
4.
Yeah.
I'm good with an 8. I think it ended well. It stuck the landing with the ending. I know that's always our worst fears, that we get to this point and then the landing doesn't get stuck. But I think they did a very well job with the way Loki ended. Well, gentlemen, that brings us to the end of another Disney Plus MCU show. We only got a couple things Marvel left for the year, so we got the Marvels, and of course we got What If in December. So definitely some conversations to be had, especially to see if Loki, of course, branches into either one of the two of these, or if they're gonna let it be for a little bit. But I think we had a good ending to the season. So let us know what you guys think. Did you enjoy this last episode of season 2? Did you enjoy season 2 as a whole? Please share us with your thoughts and opinions of what you believe. But for the homie Gage, for the homie Sin, this has been your final spoiler boys for Loki season 2 episode 6. We will catch you next time. Deuces.
Loading snacks.